want to invest in real estate? I bet you do, because you know real estate is not going anywhere. Everyone needs a home to live in. They need commercial buildings. They need this. So if you're thinking about investing, how do you do it? What's the best way to do it? Well, that's why I'm excited to have best-selling author, speaker, and CEO Scott Carson on the show today, because he's going to explain how he helps investors close deals with notes and how you can too. I'm going to bring him up right after we thank our sponsor. Every business needs a book, including yours. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Scott Carson. Scott, how are you feeling today?
Hey, I'm doing wonderful, Mario. Honored to be here. Excited to be here, I should say, and just blessed. I'll put it at that. How's that sound? It's a blessed day. Hope everybody's having a great time out there today.
I will take that, and I know we're going to have fun. We could talk about anything, and it's going to go great. But I am wanting to know, why should someone get into real estate investing? Is that a word? Whatever I said, why should anyone get into real estate investing, and why should they do it with notes?
So that's a really great question. So right now, with so many defaults and people not paying on their mortgage, it's a great time to be buying real estate. It's a great time to be buying in distressed assets. And the reason I love note investing, and it's been my primary niche of focus for the last decade plus, last 12 years, is the fact that in the note investing side, when you buy the note, you're really not buying the property, you're buying the receivables. And so when I buy a note, or in my case, a non-performing mortgage where somebody hasn't paid their payment in 90 days at least, if not longer, we are buying that receivable from the bank at a big discount. It's like it's like the clearance rack, I guess you could say. We're buying that note. That shirt still looks good on the clearance rack. It's just that it didn't fit with the right thing with the bank. So we buy that debt, that mortgage at a big discount. We then become the bank and have all the same rights that a bank does. And we make our money by working to keep the borrower actually in their house. And so we love to, when we buy the debt, since we bought it at a discount, it gives us a lot of flexibility to reach out to the homeowner and say, hey, what happened? Tell us your country western song. Did you lose your job? Did you get divorced? Did grandma get run over by a reindeer? Whatever it might be. Okay.
You forgot the dog. There's always a dog.
There is the dog, but I love dogs. So yes, dog ran away with the ex-wife. How's that sound? But you buy that debt at a discount, and it gives you a lot of flexibility to work to keep the people in the house. And so if you can get them to reperform or modify the loan, that's usually a really good return on investment as far as monthly cash flow. And then if you get them performing for a while, for 12 months, then if you bought the note at a big discount, usually 30, 50, 60 cents off, you could then turn around and sell it at 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar profit after 12 months. So everybody's in the note game, whether you believe it or not. If you've got a car loan, a student loan, credit cards, you owe Bubba Joe down their street $500 or a mortgage, you're in the note game. You're just on the wrong side of the payment stream. And our goal has been to help make America great again, one defaulted borrower at a time for the last 12 years.
And how well has it been going for you?
It's been going well. I mean, obviously the country went through a bit of a shakeup in 2008, 9, and 10 with the Great Recession, but we bought a tremendous amount of notes over the last 12 years, over $1 billion in distressed debt on single family homes, apartments, commercial property. We buy debt on just about every type of residential commercial asset. And, when we buy the debt, we're seeing deals directly from banks, and we usually see them at bigger discounts. And we usually will take these deals down 6 to 12 months before your conventional investors, the people that love to watch Flip This House or, Flip or Flop, or your landlords. We'll see deals that they'll never end up seeing because we bought the debt, became the bank, and then worked out some sort of win-win with the borrower.
So you're saying at a deep discount early on, and I heard you say 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar. So it sounds like there's a pretty substantial margin in there. What are you doing to help the people get back into it? How do you structure it where if they still owe 23 years on a 30-year mortgage, how do you get them to get back on track and then get caught up again? Because I'm sure, you and them don't want it to take longer, do you keep that note for the next 20 years, or is there a point where you can sell it back to the bank and you take your profit?
Yeah. So yes, basically we don't hold on to stuff for 20, 30 years for the most part. Usually it's 12 to 24 months.
Okay.
Because and our biggest goal is let's give some numbers to it. So I'll actually give you a deal in Detroit, Michigan. I love Michigan. Okay. Bought a lot of real estate up in Michigan, from, Bay City down to Michigan. I buy a lot in Flint. I just don't drink the water, out west to Jackson or Kalamazoo and all over Michigan. I love Michigan. But anyway, we bought a note. A borrower owed $120,000 on a $100,000 house. They were upside down. They hadn't paid in a while. Okay. And then the property value dropped a little bit because there's foreclosures. So they owed 100. They owed 120 on a $100,000 house. We
Was
bought
the house worth like $1.50 originally or something?
Well, it was originally worth about 110 back in the day, but it dropped off in value because of foreclosures and things like that. And
either way, they are really not in the right direction.
No, and when you add in they had made mortgage payments in over a year, that went into that $120,000 balance too. They've been laid off, or working part-time. It was a variety of things. So we bought that debt at 50 grand. So they owed 120 plus some change. We bought it for $50,000 because we usually pay 50% of value. House as is value was 100. Borrower, we reached out to him immediately and said, hey, what's going on? The beautiful thing is when we buy this debt, we see a lot of the behind the scenes numbers. We get a look at the loan documents, the paperwork, the call history between the borrower and the bank, if they were friendly, if they were not friendly, if the borrower mailed in hardship letters or tried to do a variety of things, we get those to look at. And this borrower had been trying to do a loan mod for a couple of years. And so we knew immediately that they wanted to stay in the house. When we had our realtor drive by the property, take a look at it, it was in good condition. They had the flag out on a holiday, little kids' toys. So they had some emotional equity in the house, but not any equity. They were negative equity. So when we bought the note, we reached out to them immediately, and we used third-party servicing companies. I'm not the one calling them immediately. It takes third-party people to do it. They're licensed to do that. So they reached out. The borrower picked up the phone. They said they wanted to stay in the house, and we found out what happened. Job loss, and their business is shut down. And they we'd like to stay. So my servicing company's like, well, could you start making your existing payment? And he's like, yeah, I could do that, but I'm upside down. I'm like, well, get it. So listen, if you start making your existing payment, I think it was like $575 a month. Start making your existing payment of $575 a month. After 12 months, we'll recast the loan. We'll remodify the loan. Okay. So what that means is after 12 months of payment, we would reevaluate their property. And so if they say it went up to 110 instead of 100 and they still owed 120, well, we would forgive that 10 grand in debt so that they were basically fresh start. In some cases, we've bought, loans where they had like a 9% interest rate where we said, okay, pay for 12 months on time. And then we'll reduce your interest rate down to 6% or 8%. In one case, the lady who lived in a house for 18 years, refinanced out, put some equity out of the property back in 2006. Her husband had a heart attack, was out of work for 2 years. And they had been trying to do a loan mod for 4 years after this refi had taken place. And I reached out to her. This is when I actually reached out because she had literally written this long letter trying to do, there was four letters trying to do short sale because their loan had been sold 4 times from one bank to another bank before it came across us. And the bank that we were buying from basically written this debt off. Basically, they owed 60. We paid 12 grand for the note. And the house was worth like 35. Okay. But she had lived in it for 18 years. Okay. Raised her 3 kids, husband, and was getting back to work after having a heart attack. But so I said, okay. I said, Sheila, that's her name, Sheila. And I said, could you start making your $400 a month payment? And they're like, yeah, I could do that. I said, okay, could you bring, you haven't paid in a couple of years. Could you bring $5 grand to the table? She's like, no, I can't do that. I said, well, could you do $2,500? She said, yeah, I could do $2,500. Okay, $2,500. Could you make $200 extra a month on top of your existing payment to get that five grand in the first year? She's like, yeah, I could do that. I said, okay, if you do that, $2,500 at the table, your existing payment plus $200 a month. At the end of the year, I'll go and drop your interest rate to 0%. Okay, I'll drop it down from 8.5 to 0%. And I'll drop the balance of what's owed from 60 down to the 35, the value of the house. And if you make your payments with a little bit extra, you'll have the house, since you're going to be paying 0% interest, every penny you pay is going to go towards principal. You'll have the house paid off in 6 years versus 23 years. Okay. And she was like, oh my God, yes. Her and her husband showed up at our attorney's office about a week later. They signed everything. He cried at the closing table. Okay. Because they were trying to, they had 4 years of stress. Can you imagine that? 4 years of stress, worrying about if it was going to be foreclosed, and you're doing all this work to mail in these documents. And then the loan gets sold to somebody else, and you start all over again. And I talked to her in 30 minutes. We had this basically arranged just like this. And she just paid off her loan last month with me. So I bought this loan 6 years ago. We were about 6 months into payments, and I get a letter from her around Christmas. I actually got a Christmas card from her. And it was basically, they let me know, say, hey, thank you. We're so thankful. And as I said, she had 3 kids. Well, her eldest daughter had just had a baby, and they named the baby Carson after me for helping them stay in their house. So we love to do a lot of good if we can. I want to keep people in their houses. I'm not the big bad bank that wants to foreclose. I actually make more money and get a higher return on investment by keeping somebody in their house, keeping the property up to date, keeping the neighborhood values high, because a foreclosure will depreciate the neighborhoods. And then, there are people that won't work with us that we do have to go the legal route and foreclose. But I would rather, I always give borrowers the opportunity, hey, let's keep you in the house. What can we do to make it a win-win?
Yeah. And I think most people want to do that, but it's just, it doesn't take much to have one thing go wrong and then this thing go. I mean, you change just those numbers, you change the interest rate, like you said, from 9 down to 6, or if you're at 6 and magically it goes to 9, and then you get behind on 1, now it's harder to,
Yeah.
It's just like, what do? You need the people like you that are helping out. So you said you kept hers for 6 years?
Yeah, that's what, because here's the thing. I paid $12,000 for the note. And she paid $5,000 basically in the first 60, 6 months. And then everything after that was gravy. So I made, golly, what did I make? I made $5,000 a year for 6 years, $30,000 plus the 6. So I made, almost $40,000 on a $12,000 investment over basically 5.5, 6 years. And
but normally when you're doing $100,000 or 150, 200, whatever the case is, you'll give it back to the bank after.
I don't give it back. I will sell it on the open market. I'll sell it if the borrower's been paying on time. If we bought it at 50, we go off and sell it at 85, 90 cents on the dollar back to lending institutions that are looking for performing paper,
Okay.
Real estate investors that want to use their self-directed IRA for a good, 6 to 12% return on investment without having to do a lot of work. So that's usually where we sell it to, is other investors and other funds.
So they're looking for basically customers, and you say, I have one that I've basically been coaching for 12 to 24 months. Here you go.
Well, no, I won't say coach. I'm actually the bank. I said, I have a borrower. I have a note here that I can sell you now. Who's now
maybe I was meaning coaching in the sense where it's like they don't need to fight with the person. You've trained them on, here's how you make the payments. I mean,
yeah, and you're right. You have to retrain them, because a lot of times people get used to not making a payment for a while. It's hard to get them back on track.
Well, there's no hope, but you give them that hope when you're going, hey, can you do 2,500 with an extra 200 bump? I mean, there's your 2,400 over the first 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a numbers game, and I can get creative in a variety of ways, and we can usually work out a situation that makes sense with the borrower if they're just willing to work with us. And that's the magic in the note business, is actually a lot of real estate investors chase the property. And don't get me wrong, the real estate's very important, because if I do have to foreclose, I am going to take that property back. And so the value's got to be there. It's got to be in a spot that's not a 2-gun alley or anything like that. Can't be in like this below 8 Mile Road there in Detroit or other places that are rough. South Columbus. I know the area, man. I know. Trust me. I do a lot of research on where we're buying distressed debt at. But that's the thing is, before COVID hit, 1 in 10 Americans was already 30 days behind their mortgage before all this chaos. Okay. And right now we're looking at 1 in 11 borrowers in America here are at least 90 days behind in their mortgage. And the banks and the government keep kicking the can down the road with, allowing delays, forbearance agreements, stuff like that. And that's a good thing. But you have to look at the flip side of the coin. It's just not the borrowers that they're trying to help. It's also the investors behind it, the people that bought the property, maybe financed it, or landlords that have tenants that aren't paying. It's two sides to every coin. And we're going to see a huge wave of defaults hit the open market here in 2021, not only in residential, but also commercial. So it's a great time to be a note investor because you can often pick up a lot of real estate at steep discounts that nobody else sees.
Now, when you're saying there's going to be a lot of defaults hitting, do you feel 2008 and 9 is going to happen again?
If I had a crystal ball, I'd be in Vegas at the casino. I think it's not going to be as extreme. In 2010, at the worst point, we had 15 million Americans that were underwater their mortgage. 15 million, okay? Right now, we are at about a 9% default rate. So 1 out of 11 borrowers is really in trouble, okay? Now, in trouble, we'll have difference of opinion on what bank they're with, what kind of loan, if they're an FHA loan or a Ginnie Mac loan or Fannie Mae loan or stuff like that. Those government insured loans, they'll probably just delay it, say, okay, we'll give you another 6 months to forbearance, another 6 months. I just read an article yesterday, one of the things that we track, that roughly about 85% of those in forbearance have done really well. And a big chunk of them, about half of them, have gone off of forbearance, but then they have to get back on forbearance 60 to 90 days later. And so you see people, like going back to work. Oh, we're going to tighten up the city. Okay, you're laid off again. And so,
okay,
that we're going to, it all.
So it sounds like a different kind of uncertainty because you're saying
we
were at 15% last time, and now it sounds like 9.1%.
About 11. Yeah, 9 to 10%, depending on who you talk to. So it's what happened back then.
Institutions back in the day, though, were a large part of the problem. It just wasn't the volatility and all that, or I mean.
So what you had happening is you had a lot of banks back in the day that they were giving all these subprime mortgages. Okay. Subprime didn't have a big, but you had a lot of paper, pristine credit buyers too, that went in default. You had a big property value drop that was affected back in 2008, 9, and 10 as well. We don't have the same property reductions right now because the market's really strong. They're keeping interest rates basically at zero for the most part. So it's a good time to go borrow some money. But what we see is the biggest difference these days is the haves and the have-nots right now. Those that have good credit, those that are paying, they're trunking along like normal. It's that first-time home buyer. It's those that are your employed in like your service industries, your waiters, your bartenders, your travel agents, hotel, service industry stuff. Those are the ones that are struggling the most to stay on top of this. So, and we researched about 50 of the major cities across the country over the summer, and it's consistently in that $200,000 valued house and below. That's where we see the biggest trouble. Now, 200,000 can mean a whole lot of difference whether you're in LA or in Detroit. You know what I mean? In LA, that might buy you LeBron's doghouse. In Detroit, they'll buy you a really nice property or like 6 really nice properties, depending on where you're at. So it's really come down to a microeconomic level. What's going on in that state? What's going on in that city? And looking at the price points. I think we are going to see a lot of defaults. It's already out there. And you also look, we have record defaults in student loans, credit cards, auto debt, and medical debt is also kind of that paper house, or I say to say that, stack of cards is kind of tumbling in on itself right now as people are running out of resources to charge the card, or they're, that $600 a month check they were getting from the government hasn't showed up in a while. And it's going to be an interesting time here over the next 90 days.
If someone's thinking about getting into it, how long would you say it would reasonably take for them to understand it enough where they could start making some traction? And then when they get to a point of competency, how long do you have to wait before you're seeing profits with it?
Well, this is not going to be a big thing here. This is not a get-rich-quick thing at all. It takes time like anything else. You've got to do your due diligence. You can't watch HGTV and become a note investor because you'll end up overpaying for deals, okay? So you got to get some learning. You got to get some education. We teach classes on a regular basis on this stuff, and literally about 2,000 YouTube videos and podcast episodes out there going through specific stuff. So roughly, we get a lot of students that come over that in 30 to 60 days to start grasping the concept, start making some offers. And then when you buy a note, it could take you 30 days or 60 days to get the borrower back on track. But then if you've got to foreclose, it'll depend on which state it's in, because every state has different foreclosure timeframes. Like New York, New Jersey, 2 years to foreclose at least. Texas, we do everything fast here. Fast highways, fast foreclosures, and fast executions. 21 days to foreclose here in Texas. So it's a little bit faster here, but it's also a little bit more expensive because the banks realize, oh, you can foreclose fast. We want a premium on that debt. Whereas if you're selling in New York or New Jersey, they'll give you a much bigger discount because you've got that 12 to 24 months to foreclose.
Now, where would a sweet spot be with the maybe 3 months to 6 months, or maybe a year where it's a little bit lower? But and what is the premium for Texas? I mean, are you paying like a large premium? Because I'd always rather go to the speed, but if it's cutting into profits substantially.
So here's the thing: it's all about the borrower in this case. So like, don't get me wrong, I love Texas because it's fast to foreclose here, but I buy a lot in, I'm in Michigan because it's still a relatively fast non-judicial foreclosure state. I buy a lot in Ohio. Michigan's like 90 days to foreclose.
Not horrible.
Okay, not horrible at all. Ohio could take you 9 months to foreclose, but it all comes down to the borrower, and that's why we do so much due diligence on the borrower, because a lot of times with one phone call, one letter, just the borrower having somebody new to talk to can result in about a 50% success rate with them getting back on track. Like, okay, hey, I'm not the guy that gave you this loan. I understand you've been through a country western song. Your dog is crying. I get it, but let's not make you cry. Let's get you back on track, and let's do a fresh start here for you. What can you pay? Do you want to stay? And if you pay, stay. Okay?
What if they say, I don't want to stay? Then you just foreclose and you're done?
No, we'll give them, well, then sign the property over to us. We'll forgive you that $120,000 debt and let you walk. Okay?
But you just got a property that's worth $120,000 for
$100 for $50,000 or $30,000. Okay, so I got it, but now I could probably repair it a little bit, clean it up, and then sell it. But still, I get these
BFD,
lists from
that's
banks.
Like 110% profit.
Yeah, I don't like to give away those type of results because people get too excited. But yeah, if you could get a deed in lieu or even cash for
allegedly, there now we're good.
There you go. Where I can give somebody, so instead of it cost me $3,000 to foreclose, I'll give $3,000 to the borrower to walk, and I'll cash in and have an REO that I can sell and make some good money on the MLS, or I keep it as a rental, or I could offer up that property and offer it to somebody for owner financing as well too.
I was trying to see on the full screen for me what you're doing there, if I could see it. That's awesome. Oh, you got one of them.
A little noisemaker here. Best $10 I've ever spent in San Francisco, and I've probably gone through like 6 of these, but it's the easiest sound machine for my podcast or yours.
That is killer.
Next time I see you, I'll have one for you. How's that sound?
That sounds real good, because I'm like, what is he using? I'm like, is it the X keys? Is it an Elgato Stream Deck? He's got something there. I'm like, I gotta peek, see what it is. So let's talk about the money. You say, does someone need 100% of the cash up front? Do they borrow from the bank? If you say, hey, I can get this property for $50,000, it's 110, or it's a $200,000 for 100. Where do you get the financing from that? Are you always fronting the money, or do you have partnerships with banks? Or
good, very good question. You're not going to get a loan from a bank to go buy a non-performing note. They're not going to do that. So it's got to be cash. Okay, I
guess that makes sense. If they're the one giving you the non-performing note, they're probably not going to fund you to.
You will on commercial. If it's a commercial note, a lot of times $1 million or greater, you might be able to have them negotiate them financing the purchase, especially if the operator or the business or the property owner has walked away and you're stepping in.
Why commercial and not residential?
Because they don't want to deal. It's not worth their time to do it on a $50,000 asset or a $75,000 asset, but it is $1 million loan is nice to have on the books so they don't want to lose. So it all comes down to that number size. Now, for residential, if you're buying residential loans, then you're going to have to bring cash to the table. And we leverage a lot of other people's money through other people's IRAs. We'll use some of our own funds. We've got a fund that we're putting together to raise capital from a bunch of people, and then we can go buy portfolios like we've done in the past. And that's where it comes down. We tell people, like, look, there's so much money sitting out there. And we see that roughly about 75% if you look at people that have an IRA of some sort, an individual retirement account, 75% of those that have an IRA account have more than $150,000 sitting on the sidelines. And most of the time it's making less than 4% interest, 0% in most cases. So like you said, if I got a deal that's worth 100, I'm picking up for 50, I'll market it to real estate clubs, or I'll jump online and market that to investors in my groups, or I'll jump on LinkedIn and join and say, hey, I've got a deal. Anybody interested in putting some lazy assets to work? Do you have a CD, a certificate of disappointment that you want to get an above average return, or do you have a 401k that's now a 101k?
So they can
You know,
pull money out of what they have, and they might say, here's 20 grand, 30, maybe here's the full 50, and then
yeah.
they don't need to do anything. You're taking care of the note, you do it, but you say, give me 50 grand, and a year from now, I'll give you 55, 60.
No, well, it all depends. What are they looking for? So that's
Okay.
part of what we, if somebody's making 0, they might be happy making 4% because otherwise they'd be listed. If somebody's making,
But if they're at 4, you might put them at 6 or 8.
exactly,
Gotcha.
exactly. In some cases, we have some investors that bring larger chunks. We might split with them and go 50-50 on the deal.
Okay.
So it just varies on the situation, on the individual deal, and what it'll hold.
So realistically, whether someone has a pile of money sitting around, they want to do this, great, all the better. But if they don't, there's still solutions to do it if they have the desire to, you can help people. And obviously it sounds like it's profitable.
Well, it is if you know what you're doing. You got to have your vendors like anything else. If you're a jack of all trades, like if you want to be the guy out there that's ripping up carpet and painting the house and trying to sell it yourself, this is not the business for you. Okay.
Yeah, that's the flipping.
Yeah, that's the fix and flipping. Or if you're a lazy landlord who's tired of toilets, tenants, and trash outs and termites, we get a lot of landlords that come into the note business because it's still a cash flow business without them having to do all the work. And so the biggest thing I could tell people out there is if you don't have the money or don't have credit, that's fine because the bank doesn't care what your credit score is. When I started doing this back in 2008, I was in bad shape with everything that hit the fan in 2008, 9, 10. So I just started dialing for dollars, calling banks, getting these lists sent to me, doing some due diligence, and then marketing them out to people in my local meetup groups, my local real estate investment clubs, people that I know, and said, hey, here's the deal. Here's what we're doing. You want to partner with me on it? And that's how we raised a lot of capital. And flash forward 10 years now, we've closed on over $1 billion in distressed debt. And I was the educator of the year in my field back in 2014. And we've helped a lot of people do a lot of good, not only for the borrowers across the country, but for themselves as well. A lot of people that we've taught have left their jobs to do this full time because they love it. Other people, they take this up as a side hustle. They love what they do and they want to invest a little bit here and there. And so this is an opportunity for those that are interested.
And it sounds very long term too. You can make a career of it. It's not just, I'm doing it for this year just to get by or something. I mean, you could, but it sounds like it's actually better long term.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is if we always say in real estate, as a real estate investor, the evolution, it becomes from the chimpanzee, as a starting off new investor to somebody at the end who is a banker. The banker always wins. Okay. And that's really what you are as a note investor. You become the bank. And that's why the banks are the biggest buildings. And nobody calls Bank of America at midnight when little Timmy flushes his rubber ducky down the toilet. Okay. They don't call the bank. The bank, though, when you look at how banks arbitrage funds, they take in and give you 0.1% and then lend it out at 6% for car loans or mortgages or 18% on credit cards. If they're giving you 0.5%, they're not making 17.5%. They're making 3,600% on that. So if you know how to arbitrage it and you can really work it out, we like to tell people don't do skinny deals. There's a lot of deals across the country that can be better bang for your buck. We get a lot of California investors like, I want to buy in California, the land of fruit and nuts with all the droughts is just a bunch of nuts now because the fruit's all dried up. Way overpriced. Like what I would pay for one note in San Diego, I could buy almost a whole block in Flint, Michigan. And just knowing how to leverage your money, looking at deals, working with local professionals like realtors, servicing companies, attorneys if you have to foreclose, and kind of trying to put this thing on autopilot as best you can.
What would you say is the better deal, or does it depend on what you want? Is it the block in Flint, or is it the one property in Cali?
I would say when you look at how you can leverage your investment over 8 or 10 properties, I would pick Flint all day long. Because the rent rates, if you had to take the property back and keep it as a rental, is going to come out strong, very strong. And I've done the work. I have driven Flint. I've stayed in Lansing. Last summer, 2 summers ago, I flew up into Michigan and looked at 60 notes that we either owned or were buying in a 3-day period. So I've been through that neck of the woods. I've always loved the North. I was born in Minnesota, so I have ice in my blood. I'm going to go down the store to get some Luska fish and a pop. I just think where you can leverage, anytime you can leverage your money across multiple doors, it's better than having just one door. Because if something goes wrong, I'll give you an example. Let's say the San Diego homeowner who's got a $250,000 or a $500,000 house there. they're going to be a little bit more sophisticated. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to hire an attorney to drag out the foreclosure process as best they can, because it's cheaper for them to pay their attorney $1,500 a month to delay versus, you know, 10 grand a month mortgage payment. So I like doing that, because if I buy 10 assets, I'm probably going to have 5, 6, maybe 7 of them start performing pretty easy for me, that I can start making money in 90 days. Whereas that one asset, it's like a flip of the coin, whether it's going to go my way or it's going to go a deal that I wish was on the highway.
Is there any other states that are really good?
Oh, well, let's see here. My favorite is Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. You know, and they're all 6 to 9 months to foreclose. I do love Texas, but it's overpriced here for the most part because of the fast foreclosure state. I am a big fan of God's Waiting Room, Florida. Okay. In Florida back 12 years ago, it took forever to foreclose there, but it was on sale. You know, I was buying a lot of stuff at pennies on the dollar that it took 1 year to 2 years to foreclose. But by the time I got around to foreclosing and going through the legal process, that property had really accelerated in value. So I was really making a killing on it. So I like God's Waiting Room, as I say. Missouri's a great state. We get a lot of California investors like Missouri because it's roughly 90 days to foreclose. The way I look at things is if you're 2 hours away, you know, from, like, I'm in Austin, so I'm about 2 to 3 hours away from 90% of the country. So it works really well for me. You know, but the states you do want to avoid, you don't want to buy in New York because it's roughly 3 years to foreclose. New Jersey's at least 2 years. Kentucky, while it may be cheap to buy real estate there for the most part, the state requires $1 million bond, and that's not cheap to get. So I don't buy in Kentucky. Illinois is a good state except for Crook County. Okay. Chirac and Crook County, AAK, Cook County, takes forever to foreclose, and it's such a messed up legal system there that if you're an out-of-state investor who's trying to foreclose on a local borrower, the judge will always side with the local borrower and give them time after time after time again. So it takes forever to evict or foreclose in Chicago. So I like other parts of Illinois. I just don't like Chicago, as you can tell. But for the most part, just, you know, where the deals are at the Rust Belt, the Big Ten, you know, conference part of the United States is where you're going to see the most amount of deals.
It sounds a lot like, if the numbers make sense and it's not too long, you know, anything over a year sounds like you better be a high profit margin.
Well, exactly right. And or in an appreciating market and getting it in a big discount. And then you've got cheap money that if your investor is looking for 6%, they're fine not getting money for a year return, but they want a big return at the end. It works out fine for that.
What would you say for someone that's looking to do 50 to 100 grand deals versus 500 to $500,000? It sounds like there's more smaller ones, and you can maybe turn them quicker, get positive with them quicker. But what can you expect if you're looking at a $500,000 to $1 million plus deal?
So on the $500,000 $1 million plus, you're probably going to pay, well, not probably, you are going to pay a higher percentage, because the banks will look at, you're probably paying somewhere in the high 50s, if not high 60s of value. Okay. A lower value property below 50, you're going to probably be paying somewhere between 25 and 30, 40 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
So that's a big difference. It all depends on the asset too. You know, where is the bank in the foreclosure process? If it's already done, great. Then go with a higher end value. You're going to have a higher payday. You know, big checks are always nice, but it all depends on the borrower. You know, it's slower. They may file bankruptcy, which they're probably going to do that. They've got some emotional equity on a bigger property, and then that can drag that out, you know, for either a Chapter 13, which is like a loan mod. That gives them 5 years to work out and get back on their track. So that's like you buy a performing note, and keep that in mind. You better bought that at a good price and make sure that the principal and interest payment that's coming in makes a good ROI for you. Whereas if you bought 10 at 50, now you've got, like I said, that leverage across the board, a little bit more security. If you do have a bad apple, it doesn't screw up your whole return.
Is there an amount that you just don't advise going over, like 2 or 3 mil, because it's just almost never in your favor?
So yeah, if I'm going to end up, if my goal is to buy the note to get it reperforming and the borrower back on track, I don't usually go above 200 grand as the value. I prefer 150 and below, because that's really about 90% of the country.
Because you know you can turn them around and get them back on track. Where if you know it's already foreclosed, now you have some other factors.
Well, if it's already foreclosed, it's just the property, yeah. But when you get that higher values, they're always going to fight you. The borrowers are always going to fight you. They're just going to give, like I said, a little bit of money to their attorney each month versus paying the 10 grand or 20 grand a month. You know, I bought a note. I'll give you an example on a property. It was worth $2 million. Okay. The borrower had been in the house. He built a house, had a ton of equity. Okay. He went to the bank, took out a refinance loan where he pulled $500,000 in equity out. He went down the street, bought a $500,000 house and moved into it, and then never paid another mortgage payment on his main house again. You know, and so you have to keep that in mind. What's the borrower going to do? Yeah, and that's why we look at so much due diligence on the paperwork. What do they do before? What are they doing now?
Do the cities play a role in the type of people? Because for someone to do that on $100,000, $500,000 or $1 million, that's a personality. I mean, you can't just say
Not
everyone that has a $500,000 house acts like that. But that's kind of I'm trying to behave, but shame on him.
You're trying to be PC here. So let's just say on those, it's like Miami Beach. Okay. High-end condos in Miami Beach, they owe a lot. There's always difficulties there. And then I'll just say the big three parts of California: San Francisco, LA, and San Diego is where those troubles happen the most.
So don't do – wow, that's astonishing. But I'm glad you narrowed it down because, everyone's got PETA customers. The trick is identifying them and not having them come back. So –
well, and that's the truth. I mean, I've had great borrowers in high-end homes that worked with me, but it's just you have that when you start running that higher end, you know, people have friends with the initials of Esquire after them, and they're willing to just drag this out as best they can, and that's why you get in that churn and burn. We do the most amount of good with that first-time home buyer. Like I said, I love keeping people in their houses if we can.
Yeah, and I like the transformation story that you're sharing too, because it's like the goal isn't to kick them out; you just want to turn it around. Right. And you can help them. I mean, if someone that's clearly someone with a $500,000 buy a new home, that's clearly someone that doesn't really care or want to help or do the right thing. But
yeah,
you know, when you have someone who it's just, hey, we got behind $200 a month, you know, good for them for keeping the home for 18 years.
Well, and that's the thing is that showed a lot of them. You know, that's a thing that you don't see on a spreadsheet. You know, you don't take that in consideration a lot of times. I look at that and I'm like, this person's been there for a long time. If they've got little kids, they don't want to move them into new school districts. Yeah. For them to move out of that house and move into an apartment, they got to put first and last month's rent and utility deposits. That's $3,000 to $5,000 in a lot of cases. Look, I would say, look, let's keep that $3,000 to $5,000 with you, or put it with me and stay in your house without having to move.
And you got them to pay off the house in 6 years instead of 23.
Yeah, exactly. But we are in such a financially illiterate society these days. People just don't know their options, and so that's half of what we do.
What you're saying, it sounds like, you know, just simple money management. I mean, I'm glad you're helping them, because those are the people, it's like, if they're willing to help themselves, yeah, do everything you can to help them. But the sad thing is, the person with that $500,000 place probably just has a little bit more financial literacy and knows what to do. And, you know, so not saying it's right, but
well, then you also look back. There's a lot of people. We try to be good people, but there's a lot of people 10 years ago that were approved mortgages in houses that they should never been into. You know, you could fog a mirror and get financed on a mortgage, and so you had a lot of that. People are taking advantage of the situation, which is fine if you can afford it and keep it up. Great, but if you're a stripper who's got 4 mortgages and trying to pay in dollar bills every month, that doesn't work so well after a while. And you look at these. You know, a lot of people want to blame the adjustable rate mortgages, the ARMs. Out there, well, or the subprime mortgage. All those have been gone. And ladies and gentlemen, ARMs have been back for a while. They've been back for several years now. Subprime mortgages have been back for at least 5 years now. They just call them non-prime now. So it's not, I hate to say it, but you asked me, do I think a lot of what's going to happen now is like what happened a decade ago? There's a lot of similarities. For the last 6 months, my spidey sense has been like, or actually 6 months prior to COVID, I was like, ooh, I'm seeing history repeat itself. I'm like, ooh, we're going to see a downturn.
Unfortunately, a lot of people making so much money from it, they don't care who they screw over.
Well, and here's the thing, too. You bring that up. Yeah, here's the thing.
No, it's something totally different.
Okay. It's totally something different. We're going to put a different name or slap a different sticker on it. But you had all these guys that lived through, you know, the executives and stuff like that at banks that lived through the Great Recession 10 years ago, and they've retired. Well, you got these new guys that are coming up and gals who want to give good returns to their investors. So they start bringing back these same type of options, these lenders and these debts, CMBS, MBS mortgages, mortgage-backed securities, doing all this stuff to get high returns. And you start seeing defaults again. You start seeing the stuff come up. And Bank of America has been one of the biggest, guiltiest parties out there. The big four, big five, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, have all been there. But like before COVID kicks in, I was talking to a guy over at Bank of America Mortgage, and they were doing FHA loans, which is your first-time homeowners, basically loans, that you usually got to bring 3.5% as a down payment. Well, Bank of America is donating the down payment and then paying up to 10 grand towards closing costs. So people that, when an FHA don't use the greatest scores, they get into a first-time home without having any skin in the game. They lose their job or they get reduced in hours in a lot of cases. Now they're in default. And that FHA product, the first-time home buyer, is the largest percentage of defaulted mortgages across the country. Last month, it was like 15, 16% of all FHA loans originally in the last 2 years are already in default. That means they already 90 days or later on their mortgage.
So essentially the banks are the ones investing in their own note going, here, we'll front you because there's a 15% chance it's going to really go in our favor. And if not, it's still in our favor.
Well, banks don't want to own real estate. So they make these loans with the idea that they're going to keep going, but they get greedier and greedier and greedier. So usually, 5 years ago, they required you to pay that 3% down. You had to bring that to the table. And the banks, they make their money on notes. They don't make money on real estate. It's a non-performing asset to take the property back. And but they're very aggressive if you start being late. So like the minute you're more than 7 days late in your mortgage, they start calling you.
I
they
see.
start
So
knocking
it's not so much to get the property. It's just that we can increase revenue by 12% if we get more aggressive.
That's correct.
And
we can get more of the market.
So they're looking more at the 84% or 85% of the new business they'll get, not the 15% they're losing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing is banks don't want to be above a 5% or 6% default rate, because then the federal government starts stepping in and said, okay, what are you doing? Are you doing predatory loans? Do you not have enough? Because you guys, banks, when they start having non-performing loans, they have to start pulling in cash reserves to offset those losses. And for every dollar they have to keep in-house, that costs them 10 to 15 times that in fees that they begin charging by leveraging it out.
Okay. Yeah, because they have a very unique lending model that would be illegal for all of us. So they don't want to lose even.
It's like me. That's like, yeah, well, that's the whole point. I mean, if it'd be like you giving me $1 and me lending that out 15 times
or 20
to people, or like right now, like back in 2008, the banks were leveraged for every dollar they had, and they had it leveraged out 15 times through a variety of products. Well, prior to the beginning of this year, do you think that number was higher or lower?
Oh, higher.
It was higher. It was 50 to 1.
50?
So that's another thing.
I remember when it was 19 to 20. I thought it was like a 19 to 20 to 1, and now it's 50 to 1?
No.
So every dollar they lose, they're losing 50?
No,
That's the opposite of what
for every dollar they get, they're leveraging out. They're making 50. It's leveraged out 50 times in different products.
Well, that's what I mean. If they're having to go into their own reserves to cover their losses, they could just not have the losses, keep it, and wow, that's nuts.
Well, that's why they'll start cutting out programs or stop being programs. That's why they'll sell debt. They'll sell non-performing debt off to it as a big discount, because they'd rather get that 50 cents on the dollar in now that they can go lend out and make up versus trying to ride this out for 6 to 12 years. Or 6 to 12 months additional, and then who knows how long beyond that. So
wow,
that's why banks would rather us step in, take over their problem children, and try to work it out. And that's where we make our money is working out the problem children.
Well, clearly you're successful with this. I want to ask you real quick, how did you get into it? What were you doing prior to 2008? Because I heard you say dialing for dollars, and you were already at a very intellectual point at that point. What were you doing prior?
So I graduated college, Southwest Texas State University, south of Austin, Texas, San Marcos, the Bobcats, with a business degree. I wanted to be, I started off in college, I want to be the next sportscaster, the next Dan Patrick from ESPN. But got a business degree, went into finance. I went into financial advisor, worked for Smith Barney for a little while. And then I went into working for JP Morgan Chase, big bank. I became a mortgage banker with them and opened up about 20 different banks here in Central Texas. And a buddy of mine started a mortgage business with another real estate investor who was traveling the country, teaching creative financing and other things. And I said, that's what I want to do. So 2004, I put my notice in. And then for 4 years, I was basically originating loans, new loans, refinances to real estate investors across the country. Every other weekend, I was on a plane and we were flying out to another real estate expo of some sort. And these big events that used to have 500 to 1,500 real estate investors at, we were doing loans for a lot of them. And then, so I was very fortunate for that 4-year period, not only to make a lot of money in the mortgage space, but also had like an apprenticeship with the investor who was our sponsoring broker. He taught me so many different things. Him and his business partner, he and she were just, I learned so much stuff about creative financing and the note business, so that when everything changed in 2008 and the music stopped like that, I literally said, okay, here's $1 for my half of the mortgage company. And I just started calling banks and lending institutions 50 to 100 a day to start tracking down these lists of non-performing notes that I knew that they had. And it took a while to do it, but it's been well worth it. I wouldn't do anything else.
Is it easier now?
Oh, it's so easier now than it used to be. I mean, you look at all the tools that have created in this new kind of secondary market over the last 12 years that we didn't have 12 years ago. I mean, we had one thing, I would pull a list and I would literally, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I would knock out 50 to 100 phone calls each day. And so by Friday, I was talking like Emma Fudd because my tongue was so swollen from making so many calls. Something like The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, just dialing for dollars, or Boiler Room. It was like that. And I got lucky enough that I knew that Capital One was selling some notes, some smaller commercial stuff, because I saw a deal here in Austin that I missed out on. And so I started dialing for dollars for Capital One, and 70 phone calls over 3 weeks. I got hung up on or transferred to the wrong spot in India like 69 times. And I finally got the right spot. And I talked to this lady in New York. She sent me a non-disclosure agreement to sign. Then she sent me over a 33-page PDF, and it had every small balance commercial loan that Capital One had in their books all across the country. And it was so small font. It was like 6-point font, Mario. Okay. And so I had to get a magnifying glass to try to read it, but it was $1 million relationship. I flipped the note. My first note I flipped was in San Diego. It was an 8-unit apartment complex that was worth $700. I got under contract for $375. I flipped it for $415 in 24 hours, made $35,000. There was another 21-unit in Houston, Texas. I got under contract and flipped it for a $50,000 fee. That led to a lot of great things happening here and there. And it's just been an amazing wild ride since then. And along the way, I've had a lot of investors have seen the deals that I want to do. And we started teaching people how to do this in 2010 as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I remember it wasn't with notes back in the day, but I remember just lead list. It's like it was the yellow pages or whatever, and you just dial. And then it was like, oh my gosh, there's online companies that aggregate lists that you can just buy. But it's still just like spreadsheets. People don't realize information and data. But yeah, I remember 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's like, what's your excuse now? Well, I don't want to. Well, that's different. You're lazy. Go away. But
that is it. Work is a 4-letter word. Note is a 4-letter word. So it's still a lot of calling. It's a lot of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is such a very powerful tool that we use to find and connect with bankers. And then it's email. So it's all marketing. Now, one of the biggest things that I tell people these days that's different than 10 years ago is that everybody's in the media business these days. Doesn't care if you're in notes, real estate, books, whatever. We're all in the media space. And so you've got to get in front of people in some sort of fashion. So the 3 biggest tools that we use is still dialing for dollars, but we use LinkedIn. We use, email like MailChimp or Infuse, something. You got to email on a regular basis to these asset managers. And the third thing is actually surprisingly is video or our podcasts. We get a lot of people, we leverage the power of video. Like I'll film a short 2-minute pitch video, but what I'm looking for, and then I'll attach that video link in a LinkedIn message direct to asset managers. And then they know what I'm looking for, which in 2-minute video, they'll call me a lot. They'll call me back. Oh, hey, I saw your video. Here's what I got. You seem to know what the hell you're doing. And you talk like you know what you're talking. So here you go. And go from there.
Wow, that's huge. Yeah, video's great, but people don't realize you can send it in emails and messages and it works just as great. It doesn't mean it has to be on YouTube and for John Q. Public.
Well, and that's the biggest thing. If you record, like I recorded one video, it's 2 minutes, 10 seconds long. It saves me having to have that conversation a million times. I'll jump onto Octopus CRM and I can automate sending out 100 invites to asset managers the first of every morning. And I'll probably get a 10% open rate, click-through rate on the videos. And out of those 10, I'll get 2 or 3 people that will reach out and say, hey, I've got something for you to take a look at.
When did you start using the video?
I mean, I've been big on video, like training and stuff like that for years, but I just started using this about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
With asset managers, the banks on LinkedIn. I mean, I've been doing a Monday night webinar via Zoom for a couple years now, 4 or 5 years now. And I've done video, my podcast is like yours. I do a lot of video with my podcast and leverage YouTube and Vimeo besides just the audio side of things. But that helps too. When they see I'm a host of a podcast with 600 episodes and 1 million+ downloads, they're like, oh, he might know what the heck he's talking about. Let me send you what I have. And I'm like,
oh, you didn't start last night. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, exactly. You've been around for a while. Or like I was just talking to a banker today who's down in Fort Lauderdale, and he was talking about what it used to be. And I said, well, do you know this guy? Or where you're at, do you remember this? And he's like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that event. There's a lot of smaller events.
See, and that's what's great too, is the longer you've done it, it's like, hey, I remember that event in, spring of 2010 or so-and-so. And, it's great to be on the cutting edge, but it's also really great to be established where you don't need to do every last little thing in the world.
Well, and that's the thing too. A lot of people ask me that same question. Well, I don't have any experience. That's okay. If you don't have any experience,
make it.
Exactly. But leverage your vendor's experience. So like I've got an attorney that's done 60,000 loan modifications. I've got a servicing company that services 5,000 other investors. So that's the biggest thing in the note space is you're not the person having to go out and fix the door like you would in a fix or flip or the roof or paint it. Hey, I got a servicing company that's handling. I just need to basically find the deals and raise the capital for it and market for it. I've got a team behind me that's going to take care of all the dirty work.
Nice. Well, I have one last question for you before we thank our sponsor and go to the imperfect action round, and it's the wheel of whatever.
I love this. Good stuff. Yes, bring it on. Ask me anything.
So,
it's got a nice flywheel on that one.
Yeah, they're ABEC 12 bearings.
There you go. Very nice.
Who is a company you'd love to work with that you haven't yet?
Ooh, the company that I'd love to work with that I haven't yet. Ooh,
I mean, we can do that, or who would you like to kick out of their house that...
Well, let's do this. Here, I'll give you a story.
I love stories.
You're going to love this story. So back 10, you're not going to buy a note from like Citibank, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They sell in like $50 million portfolios, and they usually sell in like Goldman Sachs. Okay. So 10 years ago, when I was wet behind the ear, I was dialing for dollars. I was calling Citibank every Friday. And I knew the guy who was in charge of this, Adam Rubenstein. He's still with Citibank. Okay. And so I probably called him 60 times over like a 2-month period, leaving voicemail after voicemail. I had a business partner who called and said, let me try it. So she called in and said, this so-and-so, you talked to my partner. We'd love to talk about buying some notes from me. And then she thought she hung up on her phone and said, Adam Rubenstein, Adam Rubenstein, Adam Rubenstein. I love that voice. I love that sound. It just flows off my lip. Rubenstein, 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 Rubenstein. And I told her, I was like, listen, did you hang up the phone? Please let me hang up the phone. She's like, yeah. And she looked at her cell phone. She's like, oh, no, I did not. Click. I'm not shitting you. 30 seconds later, the phone rang. Caller ID said, Citibank, Adam Rubenstein's office. And he was on the other line. And he started laughing. He was literally laughing. I'm like, okay. Biggest bank at the time, laughing at us. And he's like, okay, what are you guys looking for? I said, well, we're looking for non-performing that we buy at like 50 cents on the dollar. We can go up to like 20 million. And he's like, that's great. Call me back when you can fund $50 million and we'll talk then. Click. And I was like, always laughed about that because you leave an impression. If you're dialing for dollars or reaching out, it's okay to be personal. You don't have to be perfect. And to this day, I can still drop Adam an email every like once a quarter and he will respond back to me because I'll just say Rubenstein, and he'll say LOL back at me. So that's been a big goal for me. Get our fund and get to the point where we can fund a portfolio from Citibank. Because when you buy those big bulk packages like that, you've got to have a big team, a big network, but also you get some pretty good discounts on some stuff. So that would be my biggest goal right there.
You're going to do that.
I think I will do that this year for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's awesome. Thank you for the story. We're going to thank our sponsor and come back for the imperfect action round. You've heard me say every business needs a book, including yours. And it's true. And that's why you should visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. But you know what? Don't take my word for it. Take it from a few of my authors, like Lori.
And I went from having an idea and a possibility to actually getting my book published.
Or Catherine.
Thank you for making my mom #1 best-selling author.
Or Mary Alice.
What he got done for me in 3 days regarding my book launch, unmanageable.
John Cody.
I've worked with Mario over the phone and online, and he's been very helpful in getting me where I needed to go with promoting my books.
Rocio.
There's no way in the world I would have been able to do this with somebody else. I've attempted it in the past. It didn't serve me. As a matter of fact, I ended up more frustrated than anything. So this has been a very seamless process.
Adele.
If you're looking for an amazing business coach, I highly recommend Mario Ficini.
Or Bill Benner.
I can't make a higher recommendation than to work with Mario Ficini. He has been great for me, and right now I won't work with anybody else except for Mario.
Hey, their words, not mine. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com to get started now, and I look forward to hearing your transformation as the next video success story. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. And we are back with the imperfect action round. Scott, are you ready to take imperfect action?
Bring it on, baby. Bring it on.
60-second or less answers. The first question, what is the fastest path to the profits?
Fastest path to the profits would be buying actually performing notes at a discount. You can buy performing notes that start performing for you and get rocking and rolling using either your own funds or other people's funds out there. So that's always what we tell people, like, listen, buy some notes that you can start getting cash flow immediately to start covering your bills. If you can cover your bills, you'll feel a lot better on that path process.
That's correct. Number 2, what is your prospect's biggest problem and the fastest way for them to fix it?
They're the 4 inches between their ears. In my case, 5 inches. So it's a mindset issue most of the time. A lot of people come from the corporate job where they're not having a market. They're used to just doing what they're used to doing. And as an entrepreneurship, you got to do a lot of things. You got to do a lot of marketing. You got to do, reaching out on a regular basis. And a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. And it's not difficult to reach out to people. Everybody puts their pant legs on one leg at a time. Everybody has, wipes their ass with toilet paper. So you just got to realize everybody is an average Joe. Just got to get out and talk to people and have conversations.
Number 3, what is the best way to maximize customer lifetime value?
Ooh, just give and give and give. You always want to add value. If you love books, I'm a big fan of What Would Google Do? It's a great book that talks about how when Google launched their platform, they didn't hide their coding. They actually opened it up to allow people and developers to go out and create things that would plug in to their platform in Chrome and stuff like that. And that's one of the biggest things is we give a lot of information, and I think you should do that too. Give away your best stuff. Give away your best stuff to really help those out there that want to achieve big things. Because listen, only 10% of people will do anything at any given time. And those are the 10% you want to work with. So give them the goodies. Trust me, they'll pay you back tenfold if you make it a relationship where you're giving and have a servant mindset leadership model.
Love that. And if you don't know Scott in person, you should. He is awesome, and he's exemplified that since day one, and I'm excited that I was able to get him on the show. I have a couple more questions, but I just wanted to say that because you're saying exactly what you live. And, I think sometimes people feel it's like, oh, they know all the right answers, but there's a stark difference from people I know that they have all the right answers. They can go good on camera. They have all the right answers to do they actually live it. If there's one thing I haven't brought up a ton from doing the show, launching Expert Authority Effect interviews, I've seen the behind the scenes of how people do stuff. And frankly, I have a spreadsheet of all 200 some plus episodes and notes on it all. So
Well, and I'm gonna be the first one to tell you, not every deal goes great in my neck of the woods. We have some deals that go south. It's about taking care and doing and realizing you got to take care of people. You know, you're in real estate. At some point, you're going to get sued. I've had borrowers sue me. I've had renters sue me. I've had investors sue me. But we've always worked our best to follow through.
Yeah, you're setting the bar to, I want to help you. And you said it early on, you know, we're not trying to kick people out. And that's why I was joking with the wheel of whatever. But the reality is you're setting the bar high. You're not trying to screw people over. You're trying to help them. But yeah, I've experienced in my, with hundreds of clients over the years myself, it's about 1 to 1.5% are just like absolute treacherous.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like nothing's perfect, but for the other 98 to 99% gain, you'd be stupid not to want to at least try and do it. So
that's why I tell people, when you can come to the realization that not everybody is your client and that people kind of fall into 3 categories. This was the best bit of advice I got from a mentor of mine, Greg Reed, who's the author of Think and Grow Rich, 3 Feet from Gold, and a variety of other things. There are 3 buckets of people out there. You have the people that love you. That's the group that knows you. They love you. They adore you. They're going to work with you. You know, that's the great bucket. You have the opposite side. You have a bucket of people that are going to hate you no matter what you do, with your age, your sex, your color, your skin, what you wear. They're just going to hate you because they have a dark hole for a soul. Unfortunately for us as marketers, a lot of times when we're marketing out, we'll get negative comments from that dark soul hole, or dark hole over a soul group. You know, third bucket. It doesn't mean anything. We get so many people that love what we're doing here. We don't focus on it. We focus on that one bad review or that one person that says something like about, screw that person. If they're not writing your checks or if they're not being responsible for your living, just unfriend them, ignore them. And what you have to focus to be happy is the group that loves you and then that middle group that doesn't know you. And
get
if you
to know them.
Exactly. Get to know them, understand what their issues are, solve their problems. If you can save them time or save them money or solve a problem, you've got something valuable there. And if you keep focusing on those 2 groups over time, that third group will get tired of talking bad about you or saying ugly things. Eventually they'll come into the middle side or the one side and start saying, oh yeah, I knew you 10 years ago when you did that. Yeah, I remember you 10 years ago calling me an idiot. Yeah, exactly. All right. But hey, revenge is a sweet served cold, and just keep rocking and rolling.
Yeah, and even I'll add on this personally, even if it is someone closer, this and that, it's like no matter what they're doing, even if they're in a position of authority over you or something, don't let it continue, cap it, don't instigate it. But it doesn't mean you need to accept it for 10 or 20 years either, because if they're just negative and toxic, they're just negative and toxic. So,
well, and that's the thing too, is most times people that will say something, they've got their own issues they're dealing with.
Yeah. They're not even going to remember until a decade later when their story in their mind is, oh, I remember watching this, and it's like, okay, benefit of the doubt, but
yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent. So you had mentioned one, but I want to ask for Expert Authority World, what other books would you recommend? Actually, you mentioned 3 of them. What other books in addition would you recommend that have made a difference in your life?
Oh, one we give away a ton of copies is Outwitting the Devil. Think and Grow Rich, Outwitting the Devil by Sharon Lechter and Napoleon Hill. Have you read that book?
Great book.
Okay, good. It's like one of my top 3. Love it. Sharon Lechter is a friend of mine. I actually met her at an event and talked with her a few times and hung out. Actually was working to help buy a note from one of her relatives a few years back, which is kind of funny. But
no kidding.
That's a great one. Tribes by Seth Godin is another one I think everybody needs to read. Just absolutely, I read just about anything that Seth puts out. So those are probably the 2 other ones that we probably give out the most. Of course, Think and Grow Rich is great. The Art of Not Giving a Fuck is another great book that you should read. Everybody out there. Never Split the Difference is another one. If you're in sales or some sort of product, that's another great book that everybody should read in negotiations.
Excellent. Where would you like people to learn more, Scott?
Easiest way is to go to our website, WeCloseNotes.com. It's WeCloseNotes.com. You can always catch me at Scott@WeCloseNotes.com, and I'm on all the social medias as at one Scott Carson. And check out our podcast, The Note Closers Show, if you like podcasts on real estate investing.
Excellent. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Appreciate you for sharing, and glad we got a chance to connect again. I look forward to seeing you in person, and appreciate it.
Mario, you are doing a great job, brother. And if you are watching this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're listening to this on anywhere you get your podcast, hit that subscribe button and leave him a 5-star review while you're at it. You know, we'd love to hear that feedback. He didn't pay me for that stuff, but I tell you what, he should have.
Oh, I appreciate that. And you know what? That little ding. Love that. You're awesome.
It is better than this.
Appreciate it.
Anytime, brother. Anytime.
All right, Expert Authority World. We'll see you. We have another great episode here today. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and God bless.